My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Tuesday, November 25th, 2014, and I'm in Collinsville, Oklahoma, interviewing Martha Rosenthal. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Martha, let's begin by learning a little bit more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
I was born on July 8th, 1944 in Downey, California. My dad was stationed there. It was during the war, and my mother was there with her aunt who lived in Downey, and that's where I was born.
And could you tell me a little bit more about your parents? How did they meet?
Well, my mother grew up in Oklahoma, but she went to California to visit her sister, and my dad was stationed there in the Army, and they met. I don't know exactly where, but they met somewhere out there, and that's where it all started.
And do you have siblings?
Yes, I'm the oldest. Then I have a sister who's 18 months younger. Her name is Judy. Then I have a brother. His name is Pat, the only boy of all the girls. And then I have another sister, Brenda, who lives here in Collinsville with me. And then I have another sister, Connie, and then the baby is Mary. And we're all getting pretty old now.
And did your parents ever tell you any stories about the day you were born?
Yes. The only thing they ever told me was my dad came in and looked at me and said, "Oh, she's ugly." Of course, I guess all newborn babies don't look too good. But that's kind of been the story of my life, ugly.
And who do you think you most resemble in the family?
Well, I think I look like my mother, but everyone says I act like my father, which they're both deceased now, so I guess I got maybe the best of both. I don't know.
And go ahead and tell me the names of your parents.
My mother's name was Joanne Pascal, and my dad's name was Murray Joseph O'Connor. So.
Okay. And looking back on your early life, can you just tell me about some of those early memories that you remember that just stick out in your mind?
I remember going to kindergarten when we lived in California, and we lived in these tall apartment buildings. We lived on the top floor. We had to climb all those stairs. And my parents, my dad was in the service, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember my little baby brother, Pat, trying to crawl down the stairs. And that's basic. I remember my dad trying to teach me to tie my shoe. I remember that. And I remember one Christmas when they woke us up in the middle of the night because they said Santa Claus had come, but I didn't believe that. I thought, Santa Claus can't go to every kid's house in the whole world. So I remember, that just sticks out in my mind for some reason.
And how long did you live in California?
Till I was into my kindergarten years. I was 5. And we moved to Kansas, and then we lived in Texas. And my dad they were always moving him. And he was a military police after the war. And so they were always moving us, and I was going from school to school to school. And I never went to one school more than 1 year until we moved to Germany. My dad was stationed over there, and I went to the same high school for 3 years. It was great. I always said that when I got grown, I was going to live in one place the rest of my life. And since I was 21, I've lived in Collinsville. So that's good.
Did your father finish his career in the military?
He retired from the military, and we moved to Texas. But I didn't want to live in Texas. I wanted to live in Oklahoma. And my grandmother lived here in a little town called Morris, down by Okmulgee. And so after we came back from Germany, I was graduated high school, and I wanted to go to the tech in Okmulgee, which is now Oklahoma State Technical School. Mm-hmm. And so I went there and graduated, and met my husband in Morris. He saw me walking down Main Street, and he said, I'd like to meet that girl. So we started dating, and we married and moved to Collinsville. He had a teaching job here. And so we lived here for about 29 years when he passed away. And I have 3 children. My oldest is Keith, my middle one is Kyle, and my baby is named Carrie. And that the boys live here, Keith and Kyle, but Carrie lives in Dallas. And I have, then I met my husband now, and in Tulsa, and at a church function. And I didn't know he lived in Collinsville. So anyway, he remembered seeing me at school. So I worked at the school. And so anyway, we married, and we've been married 18 years now. And we have 13 grandchildren.
Wow. That's a lot.
We have a lot.
Fun for the holidays.
Yes, yes.
Well, talking a little bit more about your parents, how would you describe them?
Well, my mother, I don't think she ever graduated high school. And I never asked her about that, but my dad, he was from Louisiana. His mother was a Louisiana Cajun lady. She was a big lady, and she always, when she would talk, she'd say, "Oh, that's much more better," and I just thought that was so cool. But we never got to see her very much, but she was a lot of fun, and she taught me how to make gumbo, and she always made bread almost every day, and she always blessed her bread, and I just thought that was so neat. And she put my dad in the Army when he was very young. I think he was 16 whenever she had 3 boys. She put one in the Army, one in the Air Force, one in the Navy, and so my dad was stationed at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. And I wished I would have asked him more about that. I never thought about asking him about it about his life in the Army when he was very young, and about Pearl Harbor. And we didn't find out till after he died that he was, after the war, he was in the military police. And he was at the Nuremberg trials. He was a guard. And we found, after he passed away, we found his papers, his orders, and it told everything he was to take to be the guard there at the trials. I wished I would have known that. I could have asked him more about it. But I thought that was very interesting. And then I guess after that's when he married my mom, and we traveled a lot.
Who were you closer to, your mom or your father?
Me and my dad, I think because we were so much alike, we didn't get along very well. He always had to have the last say and everything. And so him and I weren't very close, but I guess I was closer to my mom than my dad. And but I lived a lot with my grandmother. I don't know, it's because we had so many kids. My mom had 6 kids, and I guess because of that, she let me stay a lot with my grandmother because she wanted me to be with her. So my mom, dad let me stay a lot with her. And so my grandmother probably shaped more of my life than my mom, really.
And this is your grandmother in,
My mother's mother.
so in Oklahoma.
She lived in Morris, Oklahoma, and a little bitty town only about 2 blocks long. It's a nice little town, though. I still have a cousin that lives there. So.
And did she have a job, your grandmother, outside of the home?
No. My grandpa worked on the railroad, and after he retired from the railroad, he had a bad stroke, and he was. Back then, they didn't really do anything about people who had strokes, and they had a hospital bed, and he was in the hospital bed, and my grandmother took care of him. She was his caregiver, and he couldn't speak, and he couldn't walk, so my grandmother took care of him, and I would help her take care of him, and I think maybe that was one of the reasons that my grandmother liked having me around, because my grandfather didn't communicate very well, and so I was there to help her, and he was crazy about me, and he gave me some old nickels, and I took them down to the store and spent them. Why did I do that? I wish I had those nickels back. but I had a pretty happy childhood.
Did your grandmother teach you anything in the kitchen?
Yes. I'll tell you a funny thing we used to do. My grandmother had chickens. I guess that's why I love chickens. I have chickens now. And we had these chickens. And on Sunday, we'd have fried chicken for dinner. And my grandmother, on Saturday night, we would catch the chicken with a coat hanger and catch that chicken. And I would hold it on this board, and she would chop its head off with an axe. And then we would hang it on the clothesline for a little while and let the blood drip out. And then we would dunk it in boiling water and pull the feathers. Oh, they stunk. Terrible. And we would pull all its feathers out, and then we'd take it in the kitchen, and she would gut it, and then we'd put it in the refrigerator, and the next day we fried it, because we had fried chicken on Sundays. So she taught me how to cook a chicken, or how to kill a chicken and cook it.
Those are good lessons to learn.
Yes. And Monday was wash day, my grandma's. And she had a Ringer washing machine, and we would start out by washing all the white clothes. We separated all the clothes, and we washed the white clothes, and then we washed the rest of the clothes. And we had 3 buckets, one with water, and we would rinse 3 times. Grandma said we got to rinse them clothes 3 times. And the last rinse had bleach in it, but that was just the white clothes. And we hang them on the line, and we always cooked beans on Monday when we did laundry, brown beans. So that was the memories of my grandma. It's pretty cool.
Would you ever go to town with Grandma?
Oh yes, but my grandmother didn't drive. She didn't have a car, and she didn't drive, so we had to walk. It was about 4 or 5 blocks to town, and we would walk to town. Everywhere we went, we walked. And I went to school there, and I had to walk, and it was probably 10, 11 blocks to school. No matter what the weather was like, you had to walk to school. And my grandmother, when it was real cold, she wanted me to wear pants under my dress, because we only wore dresses back then. You didn't wear pants to school. Mm-hmm. And she would try to get me to wear pants under my dress when it was real cold. I didn't like that. I didn't want to. So I'd go a block down the street and take the pants off and get to school froze to death, you know. I didn't remember that.
Looking back on your father's career in the military, how do you think he felt about his job?
He liked being in the military, and my dad was really strict, very strict. But one thing my dad never did was ever use bad language at home. And I didn't realize it when I was young, but now I realize that was an effort for him, because I know in the military they use a lot of bad language. But my dad I've never heard him say a curse word. But when he said you do something, you do it, or you're going to be in trouble. So you learn very young to, when your dad says move, you move. You do it, what he says.
And did your mom ever have a job outside of the home?
No, not until my dad retired and we moved to Texas. And she got a job at the nursing home. And she worked there 20 years after my dad. My dad also retired. He worked for NASA for a while as a guard at the NASA there in, it's in Texas, they lived in LaPorte, Texas, which is north of Houston. And they have a NASA place down there. And he worked there for about 4 years at NASA. And then he went to work at this nursing home where my mom worked as a kind of a security. And so he retired from there for 20 years. So my dad had 2 retirements.
Oh my goodness.
But he went in the military so young,
Mm-hmm.
like 16.
Mm-hmm.
So he was retired from the military very young. I don't remember how old, but he was 23 years in the military. And so, yeah. And then he was retired from the second job, for about 6 or 7 years before he passed away.
Did your mom enjoy working in the nursing home?
I guess the ladies or the people that were in the nursing home loved my mom because she was a very nice lady. She was very gentle and she was very good to the old people there. So they all loved her, and so she loved it too. She liked the grannies. She called them her grannies.
Well, you have a lot of siblings.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about them.
Well, my sister, that's 18 months younger than me, we didn't get along. We used to fight a lot when we were kids. And but now she's grown. She lives in LaPorte, Texas, and she has 3 children and lots of grandkids. And then my brother, he also lives in LaPorte, Texas, and he only had 1 daughter, and she lives here in Collinsville. Go figure, you know. But yeah. Then I have my closest sister. She's 8 years younger than me, but she came to spend the summer with me one year between her junior and senior year, and she met this guy, and they kind of dated and corresponded, and then after she graduated, she came here, moved here, and then she married him, and so now she lives just down the road, and she's my very best friend, and I love her to death. And then my next sister, she also lives in LaPorte, Texas. They all do except me and my best friend's sister, Brenda, live here. But they all live in Texas. And then my baby sister, when she was born, I was 16 years old when she was born. And I thought she was mine, you know. We went to the hospital to get my mom, and I helped her all the way home. And I took care of her a lot when she was a baby. And so she's was mine practically, you know, and so I helped raise her. And her and I look a lot alike. And everyone teases us that she's the before, I'm the after. But they all live down in Texas. We just came back from a visit down there, so.
How often do you get to see your brothers and sisters?
Oh, probably 3 or 4 times a year. They come, usually once a year they'll come here, and then we'll go down there. My other sister and Brenda and I we'll go down there. And my second sister, she has cancer, and lung cancer. So we've been trying to go down there more to see her. And we've been down there 3 times this last summer, and just now came back from a visit with her.
Well, you mentioned that when you were growing up, you bounced around a lot when it came to school because of your father's career.
Yes.
So I want you to try to walk me through some of the schools that really stick out in your mind?
Okay, well, I went first grade in Morris, as I was living with my grandmother, first and second grade there. And I had a teacher in second grade who was also a teacher, had taught my mom. And I remember she was very strict. And that was the only paddling I ever got in school was in second grade. She said I wasn't paying attention, and so she paddled me. And that just broke my heart. I was a pretty traumatic thing for me. And when we lived in Kansas a lot, different places in Kansas. My dad never would live on the military base. He always lived off base, and we would move around a lot from town to town. And I just remember I would always get frustrated because I would make a good friend. She would have some good friends, and then my dad would say, "We're moving." And that was always pretty stressful for me. I didn't want to move, I wanted to stay where I was. And I had my friends, I wanted to stay there. But so over the years, I had a lot of friends. I had to make new friends every time I went somewhere. So maybe that's why I'm sort of outgoing. I don't know, because I've always had to make friends. And I've noticed my sisters are kind of like that too. And I don't know if it's a family trait or if it's something that we had to do to survive, in school. I went to high school my freshman year, I lived in Enterprise, Kansas. I saw the very first microwave oven. They came to our school. I had home ec, my favorite subject. And they brought a microwave. We'd never seen them, didn't know anything about microwaves. And they took popcorn. It was popcorn was on the cob. And they put it in a sack and stuck it in this little oven. It was pretty big. And popped the popcorn in just, a few minutes. We were all just amazed at that. A microwave. And they said, well, this is the cooking of the future. So I never saw another microwave for like 10 years. But that was pretty neat. But I went to high school there my freshman year, and then my dad, at the end of our freshman year, we moved to Germany. And so I went my sophomore, junior, and senior year in Germany at the military school.
That's a big culture shift.
Yeah, but we lived on the military base. But it was still different. And we lived right by the gate that went out into the German town. Mm-hmm. So we would go down to the German town, and it was fun to listen to the people talk and speak German. And we learned a little bit, but I wished I would have learned a lot more. But we always talked about going stateside. Everybody always wanted to go stateside. When we get back to the States, we're going to the drive-in movie, because we didn't have drive-in movies in Germany. And we were missing out on all the stuff that was going on over here, like drive-in movies and Dragon Main, and because nobody had a car. You didn't have a car. And so we missed out on all that. It might have been a good thing.
How would you keep up with the latest music or the latest trends?
Well, we had television, mm-hmm. but we only had the one station, the what they want to show you, the military station. But we had a teen club, and it was just down the street from where I lived. And we had records. Of course, they sold records at the PX. And so we would buy all the latest records, and we would go to the teen club and play them and dance. We loved to dance. That was about the only entertainment we had, was the teen club where we danced and listened to music. The little RPM, 45 RPM records. Mm-hmm. And we wore those out pretty good.
What were some of the musical artists you were listening to?
Well, it was in 1962. Of course, Elvis, Elvis, and the Beach Boys, and Frankie Valli, and all the 50s music. I graduated in 1962, so it was the good music, the rock and roll music, not that stuff they have today. So I still enjoy listening to the on DirecTV. You can get the station has the oldie songs, so we like to listen to those.
Did you graduate from school in Germany?
Yes, I did. I graduated, and then I graduated in June, and then in October we moved back to the States, and that's when I came to live with my grandma and go to school at OOHRP Tech.
Well, during your high school years, was there a subject that you felt drawn to?
Home economics, my favorite subject.
Why is that? Tell me why.
I love to cook. I cook a lot. I still cook a lot. And I love cooking and sewing, and so that's why I love. But I also love sports. PE. I loved PE. That's what I concentrated on. I played volleyball. I played basketball. I was drawn to sports. I loved to compete. And I was the high jumper in high school. But we didn't really have what they have now. But there were about 4 schools that we would play against. So they didn't have state or things like that we just would compete against about 4 schools. But it was fun. I loved it. I loved sports.
Did you do any other type of extracurricular activities in school?
Well, I was in drama. I was in chorus. I just like to do everything, so I pretty much joined everything. But I had to really study hard to keep my grades up, and it didn't come easy for me. So I had to study and work on that part. But the PE and the home economics was easy. I loved doing that.
Were there any organized dances or proms?
Yes, we had proms, and we had them at the officers' club there on the base. And I had dates for all my proms, and we would have extra. We had the teen club, which you could go to. It was open almost every night. You could go there anytime, and we spent a lot of time there. They had a room where they had pool tables, but the boys wouldn't let us come in there. No girls allowed in the pool room. So we would sit around and visit, and we'd get the guys to come in and dance, a little bit, but boys. They wanted to hang out in the pool room.
Were you excited when it was time to return back to the States?
Oh yeah, that's all you really talked about, going stateside. We would say, we want to go stateside, do the things that the kids. Of course, we had movie theaters, so we saw all the movies. They had pretty much current movies, and so we would see what stuff that was going on, and we wanted to do that. So yeah, we were excited about coming back to the States.
Anything stick out from traveling back from Germany?
Yes, we flew back. We went over on a ship and we flew back. And we flew to North Carolina. And we got off the ship. My dad was going to be stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I'll tell you a funny story. We were we picked up our car in North Carolina and we drove to Georgia, to Fort Benning. And we were around there for about a month or so, and one night I told my dad, I said, while we've been gone, the black people have taken over the whole country. And I just thought that was funny later on after I thought about it. Because I'd never lived anywhere where there were a lot of black people. But there were in the Army, but not in where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was funny.
Well, especially in the 60s with the
Yeah,
civil
the
rights
60s,
movement.
Yeah, the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a good friend in high school that she lived right across the street from me because we lived in military housing. And she was black. And we were great friends. And, I never thought about whether she was black or white. We were just friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd come to my house, I'd go to her house. And she loved to play sports, too. So we had that in common. But when we came back to the States, it just seemed like down south, in the South, there were a lot more black people.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't think it to be bad. It wasn't just an observation by a very young girl.
Yeah. Do you still keep up with anybody?
Well, I went back to one. I found out by accident about they have an organization, and it's just people that went to high school and on military bases. And I just by accident at the airport I saw this lady wearing a T-shirt, and it had that on. And I asked her about it, and she gave me the number to call, and I got in contact with some people that I went to high school with. And so they had a reunion in, of all places, Las Vegas, which I said that I'd never go to Las Vegas. Anyway, I went to the class reunion, but they were, most of the people at the reunion were military contact people. I mean, their parents were in the military. They are now in the military. And a lot of them live back east. Mm-hmm. And they're just different. Mm-hmm. And it was fun to do that. One time was enough for me. Mm-hmm. Well, those people were really getting old,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and here I am still young.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah. Looking back on your education, which spanned, a lot of unique experiences over, not only in the U.S., but Germany. What do you think about the education you received?
I wish I would have learned more. I think most all people will look back and say, I wished I would have paid more attention or studied harder or took different classes. But at the time you're just thinking about having fun, mm-hmm. and doing fun things and just do what you have to do to get by. And I wished I would have learned more. And I wanted to go to college so bad. But my dad, he said, oh, women are supposed to stay home and have babies and not go to school or to college. So I didn't have any support there. But my grandmother helped me go to tech, which I graduated and got a job in Tulsa at Sunray DX. And I worked there for a couple of years until I quit to have kids. I wanted to stay home with my kids. And then when my daughter was in second grade, I went to work at the school. My husband was a teacher at school, and I got a job at the school working as an aide, teacher's aide. And I love that. Now I look back and I wished I would have went to school to be a teacher, because mm-hmm. I love that. That was so much fun. I worked in kindergarten for like 16, 17 years as an aide, and I could look back and think, I wished I would have become a teacher and just being with the kids. There never was a day when I didn't want to go to work. Mm-hmm. I love my job, working with those kids. They were so funny. The kids were so funny. Kindergartners say the funniest things. One day I told this little boy, I said, I want you to stand on one foot. He walks over and stands on my foot. One day I asked this little boy, I said, if you were going to cut an apple in half, where would you cut it? And he said, in the kitchen. Of course. Where else? Oh, that was so funny. And just I wished I would have written down all the funny things the kids said to me, and the kids loved me and I loved the kids, and we had a great time together. So I wasn't like the teacher. I didn't have to do the disciplining. I just had the
the fun part.
Fun. It was great. I loved it.
How long did you work in the school system?
22 years.
Wow. Always in kindergarten?
No, I was an aide first in first, second, and third grade. And then that kindergarten job came open and I took that. But the first job I had at school was a bus driver. I was the very first woman bus driver in Collinsville. I have something. I'm the first of something. And I had my picture on the front page of the Collinsville News.
How did that come about?
Well, my husband's best friend was a principal there at the school. And one day they were talking, I thought, well, I need to get a job. And he said, well, they need bus drivers really bad. I said, do you think I could do that? And my husband said, sure. And I thought, I can do anything if I just put my mind to it. So I went. My husband actually taught me how to drive the bus. He drove a bus. So he actually taught me how to drive a school bus. They didn't have classes back then. And you just had to go pass the test to get your CDL and you could drive a bus. So that's what I did. And that was the worst job I ever had.
How long did you drive the bus?
Well, I drove it 1 year. And then I decided not to do that anymore. So I didn't do it for like a long time. And then they got really desperate for bus drivers. And they came and said, would you drive a bus again? And I said, oh, all right. They were desperate. And so I did it for actually 3 years. But it's the worst job ever. I feel so sorry for bus drivers. School bus drivers, people do not know what a job that is.
What was the most challenging part of that job?
The challenging part is keeping the kids under control. Now, in the mornings, when they first get on the bus, they're sleepy. They just sit there and don't do anything. But by the end of the day, when you take them home, they are wired. And they're just like climbing out the windows, and just screaming and fighting. Oh my gosh. One time this was back when the first year I ever drove the bus, I had these 2 girls. They were high school girls. They were fighting. I stopped the bus and put them off. They said, get off my bus. I don't want fighting on my... They weren't my regular riders anyway. I don't know where they came from. But anyway, I said, get off my bus. I'm not having people fighting on my bus. Get off. So they did. I left them. Couldn't do that now.
Oh, no.
But it paid pretty well, and so I could do it before school and after school. And I know my husband, my teacher husband, he drove a bus. And for many years, probably 20 years, he drove a bus. And after he passed away, the first time I had to go back to school and drive a bus, I cried and cried because I thought, all those years he drove a bus, he never complained, he never griped about the kids, and that's all I did was gripe about it. Although I was good to the kids and they loved me, I know they did, but I don't like disciplining. That's hard for me to discipline. And so that's why I really didn't like it. And it's such a responsibility. I mean, that you have those kids, somebody's precious children, in your hands. And if something would happen to one of them, you could never live that down. That would haunt you. And I worried about that. Those kids are so precious. And if you'd ever, and we all make mistakes. And you could be driving along and do something and have a wreck and hurt a child. How sad. How sad. Although, when I was an aide on playground teacher, I had many broken arms of kids falling off of toys. I can spot a broken arm because I've seen so many of them. But it was fun. It was so much fun.
Do you ever hear back from any of the kids?
Yes. In fact, I do volunteer work for St. John's in Owasso, and I do pastor care, which is we go and pray for people. And I go in this room to pray for this boy. This way he was a man. And he said, "Miss Armstrong." That was my name before Armstrong. And he said, "Miss Armstrong, it's you." Yeah, and several times I've ran into people that remembered me from school. And there's a boy that rode my bus. He married a girl from our church. And he told me, he said, "I had the biggest crush on you." Which I didn't know that back then. But he said, "I had the biggest crush on you. I loved you so much. You drove our bus." So.
What subjects did your husband teach?
He was a 6th grade social studies teacher at the middle school.
Okay.
And after he passed, I had so many kids come to me and say he was their favorite teacher and how much they loved him. And, you know, he touched a lot of lives. And he was a good guy. And I have 2 sons that are a lot like him. And they're great.
Well, you kind of told me a little bit about how you met your husband, your first husband. What was dating like?
He followed me home, actually. He saw me in the main street of Morris, and he followed me home. And he gets out of the car and he walks up and he said, "I'm Dave Armstrong, and I've been wanting to meet you. I've noticed you around, you know." And I said, "Oh, really?" So we talked a little bit, and then he asked me for a date. So I said, "Okay." But then the next day I called my cousin who lives in Morris, and I asked her, I said, "Do you know a David Armstrong?" She said, "Oh, yeah. I've known him his whole life." I said, "Well, is he a good guy?" And she said, "Yes, he's a good guy." He had went to Northeastern, as where he went to school, and his dad had passed away when he was young, so he had to work his way through school. So he would work a semester, go a semester, so he finally got finished. So he was 5 years older than me, so he was already out of school and teaching when we met. So we had that first date. And then I didn't hear from him for a whole week, and I thought, he must not have liked me. And we had gone to the movies, and so about a week went by, and I was in this little restaurant in Morris, which they only have one little restaurant, and he came in there, and he came and sat down by me, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm just having a little snack." He said, "Would you want to go for a ride?" And I said, "Sure." So we went for a ride, and we got to talking, which we didn't talk much on that first date. You know how it is when your first date, you're kind of shy. So then we really started talking, and then we really got along well. And we were been dating for about a month, and he said, "Have you ever been to the Morris Lake?" Well, I never had. And I said, "No, I've never been to the Morris Lake. Where is it?" And that was where all the kids parked.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and I knew that, but I didn't tell him. I said, "Oh, I'm going to get to park." That's what you did back then to date. You went mostly out in the country somewhere and just sat and talked and made out. So we had our first date in July of 1965, and then we married in December of 65.
Wow. How did he propose?
He just said one day, would you like to get married? I said, yes, I would. So we got married in Old Mulgee. And
what did your parents and your grandmother think?
well, it was Christmas time. We got married the day after Christmas, which is, don't do that. That's terrible. Nobody comes to your wedding when you get married the day after Christmas. My grandmother knew him. She had known him. Of course, he grew up in Morris. So everybody knows everybody in Morris. And my grandmother knew him, and she liked him. And she knew who he was, but she really didn't know him. So she went to the bank one day and she asked the banker about him. And the banker said, yeah, he's a good guy. So then my grandmother was sold. He was a good guy. So, but Grandma didn't get to come to the wedding because my uncle that lived in Tulsa had came and got her and didn't want to bring her back for the wedding, so she wasn't there. We just had a very small little wedding. Mm-hmm. And so my mom and dad, they didn't come either. So, but his sisters were both there, and his mom. And so, yeah, it was a fun wedding. It was cute. All the guys we got married at these people's house, and all the guys were in this bedroom, and there was this big football game going on. I think, it was OOHRP probably, I don't know. Anyway, we had to postpone the wedding 30 minutes till the football game was over. I teased him about that for the rest of his life. I had to put off the wedding 30 minutes to watch the football game.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Did you have a honeymoon?
Did I what?
Have a honeymoon?
Yes, we came to Collinsville. We had rented a little apartment. He had rented this little apartment. And so we came to Collinsville and we spent our honeymoon in that little apartment. And then later, a couple of months later, he took me to Grand Lake and we rented a little cabin and had a honeymoon.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe your husband?
He was a really good person, a good Christian person. He was gentle. He was very quiet. He didn't say very much. He never talked. And I didn't realize that until after I married this husband I have now. He talks to me. And I thought, oh, this is great. You know, he'd say, well, let's plan to do this or that. And I thought, I'm not used to that. Because Mr. Armstrong never talked. I called him Mr. Armstrong a lot because that's what the kids all called him. And he never talked. He was real quiet. And my middle boy is a lot like him. He will not tell you anything unless you ask him directly. Mm-hmm. That's the way he was. But he loved kids. He loved teaching. And he was, but he didn't have a lot of drive. He, of course, put himself through school, but he was content to be in the classroom. He had his master's. He got a master's from Northeastern. He could have been a principal, but he just never wanted to do that. He was content being in the classroom with the kids and driving the school bus. He loved doing that, so he never wanted to be an administrator. He just wanted to be a teacher.
A noble career.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, you had 3 children with Mr. Armstrong?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, how did you find out you were going to be a parent for the first time?
Well, we were married, we were married in December, and I had a job in Tulsa. And April Fool's Day, I came home and told my husband, I said, I got sick at work today and had to go see the nurse. And she told me I was pregnant. He goes, "What? You can't be pregnant." And so, anyway, that was April Fool's joke. And then my son was born in August, so I don't exactly know when he was conceived, but I wanted a banana split, and I thought, I never want to eat a banana split. And someone said, "Oh, it's a craving, you're pregnant." Oh, no, surely not, But anyway, I was. And I was excited. I wanted to have kids. That was my goal. I wanted to have lots of kids.
Mm-hmm. And you had 3 children.
I have 3.
And when it came time to name your children, any family traditions come into play or family names?
No, I was reading an article in a paper about a football player, and his name was Keith, and I thought, I like that name, Keith. So that's what I named my oldest son, Keith. And I wanted to name him after my husband's father, but he didn't want to. I don't know why. I never did figure that out. But anyway, we named him Keith. And then my middle son, I wanted to stay with the K, so we named him Kyle, but we did put my husband's first name as his middle name. So it's Kyle David. And my daughter, Carrie, I wanted another K name, and I liked Carrie, so we just made it with a K instead of a C. And that's how they all got there. And I gave her my middle name, which is Joe. So I thought years later, I wished my name was O'Connor. I should have named one of my boys Connor. Didn't even think about that. That would have been cool. But, you don't think sometimes. You don't give it a lot of thought. You should give it some thought. But I wanted easy names. They could spell easy and write easy, because sometimes you got a long name. It's hard for kindergartners to learn to write their name when it's long.
This is true. When your kids were younger, did you continue to work or did you stay home?
Well, after my son was born, I didn't work anymore. After my oldest son was born, I was a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't go to work until my daughter, my baby, was in 2nd grade. And the principal at the school called me. I substituted, and when they needed someone. And he called me and said, "I got an opening. Do you want it?" And I said, "You bet I do." So that I went up and had to go fill out the paperwork and got a permanent job at the school and worked there for 23 years. I don't remember exactly. And after my husband died, they had an opening in the cafeteria, which I would go down on my lunch hour and help the ladies in the cafeteria, because that's a hard job. And when someone don't show up, they would have trouble serving lunch. So on my lunch break, I would go down and help them in the cafeteria. And so the lady that was in charge was going to retire, and she said, "Do you want to come and take my job?" I said, "What? I never worked in the cafeteria." She said, "Well, you love to cook." And I said, "Yeah, I do." So she went and talked to the superintendent, and they were so good to me at the school. They let me do whatever I wanted.
So you worked in the cafeteria?
Yes.
Would you guys make everything from scratch?
We made everything by hand back then. We made our own pizza. We made our own bread. Kids loved chicken and noodles. And we got a lot of turkeys from the government. So we made a lot of chicken and noodles, and the kids just loved them. And even now, if I see one of the teachers somewhere at Walmart, she'll just say, "Oh, Martha, please come back to work." No. I enjoy not working. That was a hard job. I worked 12 years in the cafeteria.
Oh, I bet.
And it was hard work. And I always think, why did I give up kindergarten? I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed it. The kids would just love, I made bread and they loved that. And of course, the lady before me did too. So it's all different now, though. Cafeteria is different.
How early would you have to get started?
I got up before 5, and I try to be at work at 5:30. I beat the janitor there, and to make bread and cook turkeys, and we always had a big Thanksgiving dinner because all the grandparents would come, and it was fun though. It's hard work though, hard work. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's what kept me strong. I love the people I worked with. Mm-hmm. The ladies that we worked together, we're still good friends.
And that makes all the difference.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Who you work with makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. You want to work with people that you like and you get along with. Mm-hmm. And they get along with you.
Well, were there, when your family was growing up in the early years, were there things everybody liked to do together?
No. My mom and my dad never came to any of my sporting because my mom was home with kids. Mm-hmm. And so they couldn't very well come to my volleyball games, basketball games.
What about with your children?
Now, my kids, I said, I'm going to be there. I'm going to my kids' stuff. So I did a lot. Both my sons were wrestlers, and always went to OSU to the wrestling state tournament every year and loved it. Iba Gallagher Stadium. Mm-hmm. We always went every year to the wrestling state tournament. They don't have it there anymore, but we always had a lot of fun doing that. And my son played baseball. We traveled. We went to New Mexico, Colorado, Chicago, playing baseball with my middle son. He was a pretty good baseball player. And so we had a lot of fun doing that. Went to so many of those little elementary wrestling tournaments. Oh my goodness. But it was fun. I loved it. We would go to my mom and dad's. Mom and dad liked to camp. They had a camper. We'd go to the lake camping. That was our spring break. Every year we'd go to Conroe, Texas. There's a lake down there, and catch tons of fish. The kids loved it. And so my boys, well, they're right now in the Kiamichi Mountains hunting, deer hunting.
It's that time of the year.
Yeah. And as soon as fishing, they love to fish, they love to hunt. So did my husband, their dad. He loved to fish and hunt, and he taught it to them, and they love to do it too. It's where they are right now. I miss you. Hunting deer.
Well, Mr. Armstrong died in 94.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was probably a tough time for you.
You know, I never really worried about it. I'm very religious, or I don't know if you call it religious, but I trust the Lord to help me, and I never worried about it. I just knew that He would take care of me and everything would work out all right. And it was a heartbreaking time, stressful, because I thought, can I survive? But he had dropped his insurance, and he was retired only a year, not even a year before he passed away. So I didn't have any kind of insurance. Now I got some of his retirement, but I thought, well, can I survive? And I thought, yes, the Lord will take care of me. And He did. He did. He gave me a wonderful husband. My husband is the sweetest man you'd ever want to meet.
So you when we started off our interview, you told me a little bit about Gary. Tell me a little bit more about him.
Well, his wife died a year before Mr. Armstrong came, but I didn't know him. and I didn't know anything about him. And 2 years went by, and I had a good friend named Alice. Her husband had passed away. So I took her to a seminar in Tulsa at Christ United Methodist Church for grief. And Gary walks up to me and he said, "Do you live in Collinsville?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I've seen you before at booster club meetings and stuff like that." I didn't remember him at all. And so we, Alice, and he said, "Where do you go to church?" And I said, "I go to the Tabernacle." He said, "I know your pastor. We went to high school together." So I called Pastor and asked him, "Do you know Gary Rosenthal?" He said, "Oh yeah, I've been trying to get him to come to church for a long time." So I invited him to church. So he started coming, and we started dating, and we got married. It's been great. It's been great. I said, God is good. He is so good. You know, he gave me Gary. Gary's just the sweetest man ever. He treats me so good. So kind. He's just so nice. I love it.
Well, you have a lot of grandchildren.
Together we have 13.
It's a lot of grandchildren. Holidays, I'm sure, are fun.
Oh, yes.
How did it feel when you first became a grandparent with that first grandbaby?
It was a girl, my oldest son. I was a grandmother. Oh my gosh. I'm not old enough to be a grandmother. Of course I was, but oh, we just loved her to death. I mean, grandkids are special. They're better than your own kids. You love your grandkids, I think, more than you love your own kids. Your own kids you had to take care of, you had to, struggle with them, but your grandkids, you could just love them, and you're not responsible for them. You just love them, spoil them, give them candy, and send them home. I love it. It's great.
Has being a grandparent changed you in any way?
I think it has. I think I'm more caring as a grandmother. I see things differently as a grandmother. I feel things differently. You just want to enjoy them. Your own kids, you're trying to discipline them, provide for them, take care of them. But your grandkids, you don't have to do any of those things. You just want to love on them. And you see only the good in them. You don't see any bad. Mm-hmm. Only the good. Mm-hmm. And they're special. They're smarter than any other kids. They're cuter than any other kids. They're just special.
What do they call you?
Grammy. Now my grandson in Texas, he calls me Grammy. And Monica, my daughter-in-law, her kids couldn't say Grammy, so they just said Mimi. So they call me Mimi. And all the rest of them call me Grandma. So, Grandma Martha.
Favorite part about being a grandparent?
Is just enjoying them, loving them, playing with them. I'm a shark. When I go over to Monica's and Kyle's, the two grandkids, I'm the shark, and I'm trying to catch them, to eat them. And so we're running all over the house. They're squealing, they're laughing, they're having a ball, and I'm trying to catch them. I'm the shark. And we just have fun. Just fun. Don't have to worry about getting on to them about anything or how they're going to act when they go somewhere. You're just having fun. Laughing. You need to laugh.
Well, we're in November right now. We're approaching the holiday season. Looking back on your childhood, do you have any memorable holiday memories?
I remember when I was in high school, when at Christmas, my dad was making cookies. And just the smell of the cookies and the Christmas tree and him in the kitchen working, making cookies for us. I don't know, that just touched me. And I always think about at Christmas my dad making cookies. Just the smell of the cookies and the decorations and my sisters and I sitting around talking. It was fun. I always remember that. When I smell cookies, I think about that. Just the time. And you don't realize when your children are young, you don't realize what memories, what is going to stick in their mind. What's going to, are they going to remember? So it's real important, I think, to have those smells around. Like, I would always, when my kids come home from school, try to have something smelled good in the house. Because you're always so hungry when you get home from school. So I have something, cookies, or they say bread baking in the oven will stay in a kid's mind if they smell that a lot at the home. It just makes them think of home, So bake lots of bread.
What's your favorite holiday meal?
Oh, turkey. Turkey and dressing and mashed potatoes and gravy and cranberry sauce. That's the holidays.
Oh, we're right around the corner from Thanksgiving. So where's the big family celebrations?
Well, my son Kyle, he just lives a mile over here. He's a big house, great big house, new, nice house. And I cook all the food and take it over there because we have so many, running around. We need a lot of room. So we've done it for the last 3 years. I cook most of the food, and then my daughter from Dallas comes and her husband and little boy, and then on Wednesday night, my sister that lives here and all her family, and we all get together at my son Kyle's, and we have snacks. I love snacks, don't you? Chips and dips and sandwiches. Yeah. And we'll do that on Wednesday night. Get together, and there's so many of us, and we just have a blast. The kids are all running around, playing, and just everyone's talking. It's just great. I love it. And we'll do that on Wednesday night, and then Thursday I'll be cooking Wednesday night and Thursday morning. Then we'll eat about 2:00 over at Kyle's, and everyone will come, and just being together. Just being together, loving each other. That's what the holidays are.
Are there any food traditions that have been passed down to you that you've passed down to your children?
I've thought about that. People should make traditions. I was telling Monica, she should have on Christmas morning something every year, the same thing. Make a tradition. We never did that. And I wished we would have, because that is something that kids draw on memories when you have traditions. I said, have chocolate chip pancakes every Christmas morning, and that'll become a tradition. I wished I would have done that, but I didn't. We were just trying to survive.
It's kind of hard to sum up 70 years, right?
It's gone by so fast.
And thinking about your adult life, what have been some of those really important times in your adult life?
Well, this year on my 70th birthday, they gave me a party. I'd never had a birthday party. They gave me a birthday party on my 70th birthday. All my kids and my grandkids and my sister and all her family all came to the birthday party. And that's going to be a lasting memory till the day I die. I'm going to treasure that memory of that birthday party that the kids gave me. It was wonderful. No presents. I didn't want any presents, but just having them there together, celebrating 70 years. It seemed like a long time. Anyway, it was great. And then having children, of course, having your first baby, and it just seems impossible that I could have a baby. You know, I mean, come from me, of my own. That to me was. It was just, I couldn't. He was like 3 months old. I still look at him and think, oh my gosh, look at this baby. I produced another human being. How awesome is that? God is so good. You know, God loves us very much. And I can see a little inkling of that as how much I love my children. And God loves us a lot more than we love our own children. It's just such an awesome thought. Just how much God loves us. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. But God loves us even more. He loves them even more. It's an awesome thing. I love to preach. Pastor won't never let me preach. We're Baptist. Women don't preach at Baptist. One time I got up to give an announcement about the ladies' meeting. I said, well, I wanted to preach today, but Pastor wouldn't let me. Everybody laughed. It was funny.
Tell me about a perfect day. What's a perfect day for you?
I have a lot of them nowadays. We get up when we want to. We don't set an alarm. We don't have to. We just, when we wake up, we get up. And we shower. And my husband usually gets up first. And he showers, and then I go in and shower. And then I come in and make breakfast. And he comes in, and we sit and talk and have breakfast. And then we have Bible study together. And we pray together. And we talk. And that always still gets to me. That we talk. We talk about things. Talk about our family, our kids, what we're going to do. Just sit and visit together. And pray together. Oh, how awesome that is. And then we go get the newspaper. We read the newspaper. I piddle around in the house, usually in the kitchen. And then I fix lunch, we have lunch, and then we just watch TV or do whatever we want to do. Go for a ride. It's just spending time together, talking, and just enjoying each other's company. That's a perfect day to me.
Looking back on your early life and your parents, and of all the things you've learned from your parents, what do you consider the most valuable lesson?
Being honest, telling the truth was something my dad was real strict about. You told the truth, and you don't lie about anything. You tell the truth, and that's something that's real important to me. And my mom was a very kind person, and I think that I have her kindness, or I try, or compassion. And I think it just comes naturally. And that's probably what she gave me most, was compassion for others.
You've been living here in Collinsville for a long time.
Yes.
Tell me about Collinsville and how it's changed through the years.
Well, when we first came here, the bank was down on Main Street, just a little hole in the wall. Now they have a nice big bank. But we played Owasso football and basketball, because Owasso was a really small town then, and so was Collinsville, and we played each other in sports. And now they're grown, but Collinsville has grown a lot in the almost 50 years that we lived here. It was just a little community, and you knew, especially if you worked at school, you knew everybody. The teachers lived in Collinsville, and everybody knew everybody. You would go down Main Street, and you'd know most people, and they had a Collinsville newspaper, and when you read about someone dying in the paper, you knew that person. Or someone got married, or anything that happened in Collinsville, you knew those people. And the old patriotic people that lived here, Mr. Bayouth down on Main Street, and the little stores down there, the people that lived here. Now you don't know anybody, and you don't know the kids at school anymore. Like when I was worked at school, I would see a kid and I'd say, "You're so and so," because he looked just like his parents. I remembered his parents when they went to school, and it's not that way anymore. There's so many more people that live here, and you don't know people anymore like you did back when it was a small town. That's the big change, I think. There's a lot more homes here now, new additions, and new stores. And I remember they wanted to put a Walmart here in Collinsville. The founding men, the guys that ran the city, said no, because it'll ruin our little town, and so we never did get that Walmart. We still don't have Walmart, but that was the way it was back then. The city council guys, the old men that ran the Burnside Heinrichs and Bayouth, and had their little stores downtown. They're not there anymore. They're all gone. I guess Walmart did put them out of business. But we never did dig that Walmart in Collinsville.
Well, you were born in California.
Yes.
And you live here in Oklahoma. What is special about Oklahoma to you?
Well, this is where my grandmother lived, and so to me it was home. Home was Oklahoma. And when my dad was in the service, you met people from everywhere, from all different states. But in the yearbook, you put where your home was, and I put Oklahoma every time, because that just reminded me of when I was a kid, and I would walk down the railroad tracks at Morris, and walking, you were free to do whatever. You weren't afraid to walk down Main Street. You weren't afraid to walk across town and walk down the railroad tracks and walk to your friend's house. And it was a small community, and everybody knew you, and you knew everybody. And Oklahoma was just home, because that's where my heart was. And I think the people of Oklahoma are wonderful people. They're caring and kind. And it just, to me, that's special. When you care about people, that makes you special. And I think Oklahoma's special because they care about people.
Well, looking back on your life, what accomplishments are you most proud of?
Well, my 3 kids, they're pretty good kids. And the fact that I have stayed true all these years to what I believe, my core values, my belief in Jesus Christ as Savior. I'm proud because I've stayed true to that, to my beliefs. And I think people in Oklahoma are that way. They're true to what they believe.
How would you like people to remember you? Not just the general public, but your family.
That I was a kind, caring person, and I had strong beliefs, and I held to them, and I loved my children and cared about them. Everybody will say, oh, she was a nice lady. Yeah, that's it. She was a nice lady. That's what they'll say.
Well, we've talked about many things this morning. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you want to bring up before we sign off?
I want my grandchildren, and they see this, to know that I loved them very much. I cared about them. And they're all very special. And I want them to have the strong beliefs that I have. Just, your life will be much better if you believe in God and be true to your beliefs and live your life so that that you won't look back and say, I regret doing this or I regret doing that. Just live your life to the fullest and be true to what God has given you.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.